A woman's work, the preservers of culture. So for the past few weeks, we have engaged in a variety of different performances and ritual performances. And many of these performances have been led by women and have embodied a lot of movements that speak to the femininity and the quality of femininity, adding grace and finesse as it relates to the fingertips, as we learned from the Night of Puppetry and the contemporary Chinese opera, in certain ways that we carry ourselves and our bodies and the way that we walk and the posture. And even to the Nirvanti, which the Indian dances that we went over. I recall even moments of how to tie a sari onto the male figure, and very different from the female figure. And but there's something very beautiful about also having this conversation around gender and class. And there's also something very powerful and impactful about how gender is translated for other cultures, particularly around ritual performances. And so I wanted to open up first with Zora Hurston as she begins to talk about why women always take advantage of men. And the story starts off as such. You see, in them very first days, God made a man and a woman and put them in a house together to live. Way back in them days, the women was just as strong as the men, and both of them did the same thing. They used to get the fussing about who was going to do this and that, and sometimes they'd fight. But that was even balanced, and neither one could whip one another. One day, the man said to himself, "Believe I'm going to go see God and ask him for a little more strength so I can whoop this woman and make her mind. I'm tired of them of these things." So he went up to God. "Good morning, old Father. Howdy, man. What you doing around my throne so this morning? I'm troubled in my mind and nobody can ease my spirit except you." God said, "Put your plea in the right form and I'll hear an answer. Oh, Master, with this morning stars glittering in your shining crown, with the dust from your footsteps making worlds upon worlds, with your blazing bird we call the sun, flying out of your right hand into your morning and consuming all the day flesh and blood of stump black darkness, and come flying home every evening to rest on your left hand. And never once in your internal years mistood that left hand for the right. I ask you please to give me more strength than that woman you give me, so I can make her mind. And no, you don't want to be always coming down past the moon and stars to be straightening her out. And it's got to be done. So give me a little more strength, oh Maker, and I'll do it." "All right, man. You got more strength than the woman," replied God. So the man ran all the way down the steps where he been. He got home. He was so anxious he tried his strength on the woman that he couldn't take his time. Soon as he got in the house, he hollered, "Woman, here's your boss." God done told me to handle you in whichever way you balls. That woman flew to a fighting. I'm right off. She fought in fighting, and he beat her and got wind and tried again, and she was whipped again, and she got herself together and made it a third try for him vigorously. But he beat her every time. He was so proud he could whip her at last. That was just crowned over and made her do all the things she didn't like. He told her, long as you obey me, I'll be good to you. But every time you rear up, I'm going to put plenty of wood on your back and plenty of water in your eyes. The woman was so mad, she went straight up to Heban and stood before the Lord. She didn't waste no words. She said, Lord, how come before you mighty today, and I want back my strength and power I used to have. Woman, he said, you got the same power you had since the beginning. Why is it then that the man can beat me now and he used to couldn't do it? He got more strength than he used to have. He come and asked me for it, and I gave it to him, and give them what they ask. And you ain't never asked me for no more strength. Please, sir, God, I'm asking you for it now. Just give me the same as you gave him. God shook his head. It's too late now, woman. What I give is what I never take back. And give him more strength than you, and no matter how much I give you, he'll have more. The woman was so mad, she wheeled around and went off and went straight down to the devil and told him what had happened. The devil responded, don't be discouraged, woman. You listen to me and you'll come out more than a conqueror. Take them frowns off your face and go fight right on back to Heban and ask God to give you them bunch of keys hanging from the mantelpiece. Then you bring them and I'll show you what to do with them. So the woman climbed back up to Heban again. She was mighty tired, but she was more outdone than she was tired, so she climbed all night long and got back up to Heban. When she had gotten to heaven's butter without a melt in her mouth, and O Lord and Master of the rainbow, I know your power. You never make two mountains without you putting a valley in between. And I know you can hit a straight lick with a crooked stick. I ask for what you want, woman. God, give me them bunch of keys hanging on your mantle before your throne. And God replied, take them. So the woman took the keys and hurried back down to the devil, so he could tell her what to do with them. There were 3 keys on the bunch. The devil said, see these 3 keys? They've got more power in them than all the strength in man can ever get you to handle. Now, this first big key is for the kitchen. And you know a man always favors his stomach. The second one is the key for the bedroom. And you know he don't like to be shut out of that either. And that last key is the key to the cradle. And he don't want to be cut off from his generation at all. So now you take these keys and you go lock up everything and wait until he come to you. Then don't you unlock nothing until he use his strength for your benefit and your desires. The woman thanked him and told him, if it wasn't for you, Lord knows what us poor women folk would do. He started off, but the devil halted her. Just one more thing. Don't go home bragging about your keys. Just lock up everything and say nothing until you get asked. And then don't talk too much. The woman went on home and she did like the devil told her. When the man come home from work, she was sitting on the porch singing some songs about peck on the wood, make the bed good. When a man found the three doors fastened, what used to stand wide open, he swelled up like a pond lumber after a rain. First thing he tried to break break in and cause his fingers. First thing he tried to break and cause is his strength would overcome all obstacles. When he saw that he couldn't do it, he asked the woman, who locked this? She told him, me. Where'd you get the keys from? God gave it to me. He ran up to God and said, God, woman got me locked away from the victuals and bed and my generation, and she says she get the keys from you. God said, I did. I gave her the keys, but the devil showed her how to use them. Well, old master, give me some keys just like them so I can get in full control. No, man. What I give is what I give. Woman got the keys. How can I know about my generation? Ask the woman. So the man come back and submitted himself to the woman, and she opened the doors, and he wasn't satisfied, but he had to be given what he had to be given. After a while, he said to the woman, let's divide up, and I'll give you half of my strength if you let me hold them keys in my hand. The woman thought that over. So the devil popped up and told her, tell him no. Let him keep his strength and you keep your keys. So the woman wouldn't trade with him, and the man had to mortgage his strength to her life. And that's why the man makes and that's why the man makes and the woman takes. You men is still bragging about your strength, and the woman is still sitting on them keys and letting them blow off till she get ready to put the brittle on you. I bring up this story because there's some interesting things that Zora Neale Hurston is playing with here, where of course there is a criminalization that can be seen with the woman, where she is entertaining conversation with the devil, and there are other areas in which she can be seen as manipulative, but also within this story, I think there's another form of duality in which she's a keeper of culture, her generation, the house, the cooking, the art that makes a household, and a household considering that as family, and many of the traditions that we dealt with really responded to an overall family aspect and communal aspect. And they were responding to a larger concern within most of those communities around patriarchy, around caste systems that we spoke about, as well as related to and I hope I say this right, the Dabak, which is the Palestine dance. We see these areas in which the community is seeking liberation through the arts, through the culture, and being able to hold space for new forms of and new ways of being. And so a few of the things that I think we need to look at is how women are in these spaces allow for men to also access them, because it is the women that are allowing that are creating that access. And I thoroughly appreciate it. I'm actually I was sitting back and fooling with a few other books, which is Hip Hop Feminist Pedagogy. I read a piece of this and some things that kind of came up too, which was very interesting as it related to kind of the work that we'll be embarking on as it relates to the Bronx, which says here that nestled in each piece is performance and performativity, the act of being and becoming. Within these poems, I was able to make sense of who I was in the moment, my being, and as well as who I am becoming, and to manifest me in all of my complexities and contradictory identities. And we see the same kind of situation with the story, where the woman offers this complexity, and at the same time she offers some areas of contradictory, but it's in that we can actually honor women for being discerning, being able to navigate both the devil and God, right? And this is what happens with some of these performances. We end up navigating the political frameworks and also our communal aspects and bringing them together to be something harmonious. It's not an easy harmony, but it is a harmony nonetheless that has to develop. And so, as Brown in the book of Hip Hop Feminism talks about, she begins to really unpack, how does performativity move through the overall community, and that it is not just subjected, yes, to just men or and let alone a specific group of race or people. But she also talks about how the feminist movement with this expands the dialogue and stretches, and hip hop should not be one of the things that is expected only as a male centered performance. And so there are some things that happens within this kind of feminist pedagogy that we need to begin to look at, that I was glad to kind of view within all of these areas and that we were studying, which is that the first thing was to appreciate creative production expressed through language, art, and activism. And we definitely see that with Morel, who was the Native American woman who came in, who did Spider Woman. I mean, the way that she handled the dialogue, as soon as I asked her about folklore, she corrected me. And she didn't want to answer the question about folklore because she did not see it as folklore. She did not see what she did as folklore. And that's appreciating really her own production, that creative production that she needed to validate her own work, and how she operated within her creative context. That what she was doing was yes, performance, but it spoke to another area in her life as a performer. There's also this privilege of betweenness of the black girl of epistemology and the Black feminist standpoint. And so these two areas, right, of passing this information down to generations, and how women operate within the context of their work, not only from, you know, just the practice and performance, but the belief that comes with it, and also the workings of hope that come along with that practice, with that activism, and that activism as practice, and to also interrogate the limitations and possibilities of feminism and the pedagogy, and therefore self-adjusting. And a good example of that is where we see with the Chinese opera this constant adjusting to really make sure that the form is appropriate, that the posture is appropriate, to also answer the call of what is feminine, but also to answer the call that what is appropriate for the community and the time, and that's housed within the body of the woman, and that form of being, and that's that being that constantly keeps coming up. I mean, one of my favorite people, Reverend Bear, he often says, he's a urban shaman, if you will, who says, "I am who I am becoming," and being able to realize the aspect of becoming and being are something that we've really been wrestling with this week, and that we've been in dialogue with, and as it relates to really digging further into these cultures, that where are we in in our positionality with these cultures? Are we ready to move beyond being spectators? Are we ready to engage and embody these practices? There's some ways to really access that. Another thing that comes up too is making sure that we speak to the location of the community, and I really see we really saw that with Michael Robeson when he came, that he speaks to the location of the community, and that's a very unique way of also bringing in ballroom. That when we talk about after having a whole few weeks of, you know, artists who come in, and definitely these women who come in with all these cultural aspects, and to then, you know, bring it in with ballroom. I mean, it's a beautiful echo and a response to the work of women, and the work of women as preservers of culture. And, you know, Michael even kind of juxtaposes the, you know, with also, right, this idea of reality TV, and how now women in media are now referencing trans women and the ballroom community for insight and for visual insight. And when at one point ballroom was really, really highly based in looking at supermodels and women for their inspiration. So that the performance of femininity was has somewhat been an exchange, and that's what we're kind of seeing within this kind of cross-cultural phenomenon, and how I've seen also these women working within these cross-cultural contexts. And, you know, a few things that have come to mind, you know, have also been within looking at one of the songs that kind of inspired this, is Maxwell, A Woman's Work. And he begins to even talk about, he says, "Pray God you can cope. I'll stand outside this woman's work, this woman's world. Oh, it's hard on a man. Now his part is over. Now starts the craft." And I wonder, I think about myself in position to all of this work, which is something I admire, but I'm also in a lot of question about where do men need to be within this performance? How do we act in solidarity with the performance, and not also feel like we have to be involved with the performance, and the performance of women, and validating that, right? And most of the time, it is this thing of where, like, even in Western construct, in the performance of dance, men take the lead. They kind of twirl women around, and they dip women, and so they are part of, they're actually creating the movement, which in this case, and in many of these structures, none of this required a man's touch, a man's work, or anything. And so it's great to see that these areas were, that these performances were able to stand alone. I really have to say, I mean, I did admire the Palestinian dance because it moved in between men and women, and they both had different positions and different ways of body movements. But what we do see is we do see that much of the performance, as it relates to Amir Solidaire, a part of the Debak Freedom Group, and Bay Ridge, you know, he talks about like the importance of being able to perform and be liberated from what actually, you know, looks non-offensive. And many people question him and call him Aladdin and say that, oh, you know, you're dressed like Aladdin. And he so has to have on a vest, and he's colorful, which is very different than his urban apparel and his baggy jeans and his sneakers. And what does that say about masculinity and also the preserving of culture? And so as we also talk about what, you know, where women are, we also have to think about what modernity is in relationship to the performance. And modernity has a tendency to also introduce new gender norms, right, and new gender performances, so that when going back to reappropriation or reviving of that performance, it doesn't fit within the stereotypes and images that we have put within our culture, and so the body becomes trapped. And I think that's one of the larger things about understanding the importance of the bodies that are involved. I mean, a Indian body, an Asian body, a black body, a black trans body. These can be sites of resistance, and definitely as it relates to women, it's already in opposition to patriarchy, and so I as much as I can just solely say that we need to basically, you know, men need to sit down and shut up. There's another component that, you know, that requires a lot of critical analysis. How do we find other ways of creating support and creating safe space for these bodies to perform? And that requires us looking at, you know, the Western construct around the arts, and not making tokens out of these cultures and out of these performances, and also allowing for the performance to not be trapped in festivals, which was something that was very conflicting for me. A lot of the performances that we talked about, they were deeply rooted in festivals and kind of showcasing. And I'm interested in the show, in yes, the display and the demonstration, but I'm not interested in the showcasing and the exploitation, right? Because it's an exploitation of the body. And if anything, what we see most of the time, even with women, that we see this exploitation. We see an exploitation of body, where the body then is no longer safe, no longer valued, and at the same time, it is then after that considered an object, and it is lust. And there's lust involved, and these are troubling contexts for which the body, you know, is then forced to operate under. And if the performance is dealing with some form of, if the body is dealing is struggling within the performance to fully engage what actually could have been considered a ritual practice, it devalues the performance. and it devalues the performativity that comes behind that performance. That the very essence of the performance is then lost, or let alone challenged, and can be degraded. And so one of the things, and that's kind of one of the things about Goffman. Goffman deals with this idea too around, which was something I just read in the presenting of self in everyday life. Goffman deals with this construct around how to be authentic, constantly remaining authentic, even as a disturbance, and that's when and that's kind of something that we have to begin to explore. And I think one of the things that I want to share along with that statement is a book called Culture Care. I do recommend it definitely for our class as you continue to teach this course. It's wonderful. Culture Care is by Makoto Fujimura, who is a contemporary artist in Jersey. And he begins to talk about the definition of culture care, which is something that he's kind of coined with the movement. He's a Japanese contemporary painter. But what he says here, he says, culture care is to provide care for our culture's soul, to bring our cultural home, our bouquet of flowers, so that reminders of beauty are presented in even the harshest environments where survival is at stake. We may need to learn to cultivate these reminders of beauty in the same way flowers are cared for and raised. Culture care restores beauty as a seed of vigoration into the ecosystem of culture. Such soul care is generative. A well-nurtured culture becomes an environment in which people and creativity thrive. And so where does that leave us with looking at the preservers of culture, and women as preservers of culture? Well, Makoto does a good job romanticizing, right? But he also talks about this thriving of culture and where it rests. It rests in these areas where survival is at stake. And the survival of trans women, the survival of black trans women, the survival of black women, and the list goes on, right? There is survival at stake. There are voices that are not being heard. There are policies that haven't been passed, and there are constant areas that are at risk, and we have not created, I feel, in academia, let alone in this area of performance studies, have we created an area for women's voices to really echo the preservation, and also this area, if I will push on it, this salvific area, right? This salvation for women, right? Where there is no fear, right, of being judged based off of patriarchy and Western constructs. And so in the end, we have to honor those scholarships. I love how Bell Hooks comes in and begins to, also expand on, I think she offers a full critique. She offers a full critique to the feminist movement, and she also, and at the same time, she's also speaking to the issues around, being in a man's world, which is why I honor her, and definitely in this case. But she says here, feminists offered us the promise that a culture would be created where we would be free and know love. But the promise has not been fulfilled. Many females are still confused, wondering about the place of love in our lives. Many of us have been afraid to acknowledge that love matters. For fear For we fear we will be despised and shamed by women who have come to power within patriarchy, by closing off emotion, by becoming like the patriarchal man who once critiqued as cold and hard-hearted. Power feminism is just another scam in which women get to play patriarchs and pretend that the power we seek and gain liberate us. Because we do not create a grand body of work that would have taught girls and women new and visionary ways to think about love, we witness the rise of a generation of females in our late 20s and early 30s who are longing for love as weakness, who focus our sights solely on gaining power. And I'll stop there because really quick, that's Communion, The Female Search for Love by Bell Hooks. And she brings this, I love how she brings this up, because there has always been this area where women have had to take on roles. And I admire Meryl, who came and really shut down the academy for me and shut down the moment in which where she really was identifying that's a man's work. That's how you're working. That's how, and she was required for me in her statement of removing folklore out of my language. She was required for me to decolonize myself and decolonize my work and decolonize my practice, and really get to the essence of my practice, which I had not done. And because I'm always, and ever since I've been in the academy, I've always searched for new ways to say, oh, I just want to articulate further, but who am I articulating to? I'm not really articulating for my community. I can't use half of the words I use in school for my community, let alone can I use them to create a platform for other communities that are in need. I can, and so I think where I appreciate Meryl for that, I really have to say, to me, she really brought forth a real prophetic call, where she spoke truth to my power, and I was very, very grateful for that, and I honor her as well, because I think, if anything, she really showed me to really rethink my position, and rethink my positionality as it relates to engaging with other cultures, making sure that I come genuine and authentic, and offer that lens of real care.